For 40 days, the Middle East was locked in a brutal regional war, and then, quite suddenly, the fighting stopped. The breakthrough came via Islamabad. Pakistan brokered a deal between the United States and Iran, promising an immediate halt to the violence across the entire theater. By April 8, 2026, the U.S. president was holding a press conference to celebrate the news, officially declaring the deal a global victory for world peace. But there was a structural failure beneath the celebration. This geopolitical truce relied entirely on verbal promises. Not a single page of a written binding agreement was ever signed or publicly released. On the ground in Lebanon, the reality was a city holding its breath. The streets were quiet, paused, waiting for the first signs of normalization. At first, the guns did go silent. Hezbollah halted its rocket fire, acting on direct confirmation from Tehran that this new ceasefire covered every front in the region. The human relief was immediate. Families who had spent weeks fleeing airstrikes stopped running. They began packing their suitcases, preparing to return to their neighborhoods in central Beirut. They trusted the diplomatic rhetoric. But relying on an unverified verbal agreement at the highest levels of government caused thousands of civilians to drop their guard at the exact moment the war was about to mutate. The illusion of safety lasted only hours. Instead of peace, Israel launched a sudden and massive escalation, beginning the absolute largest aerial campaign of the entire conflict. A fully coordinated wing of 50 fighter jets crossed into Lebanese airspace. The velocity of the assault was staggering. In just 10 minutes, those jets executed over 100 separate strikes. They hit the densely populated heart of central Beirut, with absolutely zero advance warning given to the population. Hundreds of people were killed in the initial onslaught. The families who had just started packing their bags to return home were the ones caught in the center of this diplomatic failure. This map shows the geographic divide. Iran treated the ceasefire as total, but the U.S. and Israel interpreted the unwritten agreement to entirely exclude Lebanon. The U.S. president dismissed the devastation in Beirut, calling the strikes a, quote, separate skirmish. When global powers rely on unwritten deals, they leave wide gaps in the language, significant semantic gaps that allow for the continued destruction of civilian centers under the guise of peace. Any hope for the ceasefire is gone, and the regional conflict is immediately reigniting. Iran retaliated for the Beirut strikes by closing the Strait of Hormuz, moving naval assets into position to block the world's most critical oil choke point. The U.S. reaction followed instantly. The Pentagon placed American forces on standby, shifting carrier groups and hardware back into position for active combat. Without written enforcement mechanisms, a verbal ceasefire serves as a tactical reset, providing the window needed to reposition assets for even larger attacks. Despite the escalation, official peace talks are still scheduled to begin this Friday in Islamabad. It is a moment of total disconnect. Both sides continue to claim the ceasefire as a victory, even as they move their militaries back into the fight. These high-level diplomatic claims mean very little on the ground, where the civilians of Beirut are left digging through the destruction. True peace requires ironclad written guarantees, because when leaders announce the end of a war through vague rhetoric, it is the civilians who pay the ultimate price.